Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your patience. My name is JC Cortez, and I am the Director of Training and Development here at Synergia and the Metropolitan Parent Center. Thank you for your time and your patience again. We're so happy that you can join us, and I just want to give a quick introduction into who we are. Synergia is a multi-service agency located in Manhattan, here in Harlem, and we've been supporting New Yorkers with disabilities and their families for more than 40 years. We offer a rich source of information and training tailored for parents, including parents whose primary language is not English or who they themselves have special training needs. We help them participate more effectively in their children's education and development, and we partner with professionals and policymakers to promote outcomes for all children and people with disabilities and their families, with an added focus on communities of color and the economically disadvantaged. I want today to welcome our presenters here from Advocates for Children, Ms. Allison Gutu and Mr. Michael Athey. Thanks for being here. We are Advocates for Children, Synergia, and Include NYC are three federally funded parent centers here in New York City, and together we uplift and support each other's work on a number of topics. Advocacy for Children, you'll probably see in the news often changing policy and leading the way into pushing for rights. So we're so thankful to have you two here with us today and to talk to us on a topic there's a lot of confusion around, is like, how does special education work in charter schools? How do we access it? How do we challenge situations that become difficult? But we're so thankful to have you here and to help us understand this topic better, especially as we start to return to in-person classes this fall and understanding what we might need to do in terms of seeking compensatory services or things of that nature. So I will let you guys take over. But before we do, just a moment for some housekeeping things. We will share the link to this presentation. We are being broadcast on Facebook Live right now. Thank you, Facebookers, for being here. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the presentation. Also, for those attending here via Zoom, if you have any questions, you can place them in the chat, or you can place them in the Q&A. And yes, and the PowerPoint that is being shared today will also be shared with you in the follow-up email that I'll send you. So yes, if there are any other questions, please ask away. If we haven't answered your question completely, please ask it in another way. We want to make sure that you leave here with as much information as you can. So yes, so without further ado, please go ahead.
Thank you for that introduction. I haven't heard the old fire drill in the building excuse in a while. So, shout out to the interpreter for that one. Just playing. Hope he's able to come back and join us when he can. As mentioned, I'm Michael Athey. I'm the charter schools attorney at Advocates for Children. And my colleague, Ms. Allison Gutu, is also, she works in the charter schools realm, as well as doing many other things at Advocates for Children. So let's get right into it. So today will be, here's kind of the roadmap for today's training. We'll give you a brief overview of charter schools. We'll talk a little bit about the promotion policy, academic supports that are in charter schools. We will go over, I know special education is something that is very important to this group, so we will touch on special education. I should also mention, if you have questions, I think you can put them in the chat and we will answer them as we go throughout the training. We'll go over discipline in charter schools, and then we'll briefly touch on what obligations charter schools have in this remote learning environment. So just a quick trivia question. You can answer in the chat or you can answer in your head. But what percentage of public school students do you think attend charter schools in New York? So I'll just wait a few seconds while you think about it. I don't know if folks are putting answers in the chat, but the correct answer is D, 13%. This is an estimate, but according to the New York City Charter School Center, around 136,000 kids attend charter schools, which is about 13% of all students in public schools. These exact numbers may have been impacted by COVID. And 51% of this 13% are Black students, and about 40% are Latinx students. So let's briefly touch on promotion in charter schools. Each charter school sets its own promotion or academic policy. So if you're thinking of enrolling your student, your child, or if you're thinking it's throughout the school year and the school is saying, talking about holding back your child, or either at the end of the school year or even during the school year, it's important to ask for the promotion or whatever their academic policy is to start, to actually know what criteria are they using to promote students. And the policies that charters have, it can include higher grade to pass a course. It can include a reliance on performance on a standardized test. And many charter schools, they don't offer summer school to students. So it's harder for your child to make up the class that they failed, and they may have to repeat the grade. So it's important before enrolling to know what is the school's policy. As a result, some students in charters repeat grades at very high rates. Some charter school networks may demote students if they don't think the student is on track to pass state exams. So if you are working with a student that has been demoted, you should call Advocates for Children. I see numbers going up in the chat, but I don't know if any of that needs to be addressed. So I'll pause after each slide just to let the PowerPoint breathe and see if people have some thoughts.
Sure, we're just now having intermediate interpretation until the initial interpreter gets back. So that's is in the chat.
Okay, all right. Because I see it bubbling, and I wasn't sure what was happening. So I know my presentations can be, it's so exciting, but usually not that exciting. All right. Here's another question. You can answer in the chat. You can answer in your head. But what percentage of students in New York City charter schools are multilingual or English language learners? What are some people's guesses?
We have one participant that says A, 20%, another that says 16, another 20%.
Yep. Okay. All right. So
one vote for 11%.
Okay. No love for D?
I don't have a D yet.
Okay.
D, I have a D.
All right. Well, congratulations to that lucky person. They are our winner. The answer is actually D. So as of the 2020-21 school year, multilanguage or English language learners comprise about 7% of enrollment in charter schools. Now, compared to district schools, that number is about 14%. So usually that question, people think the number is much higher. So what are some obligations that charters have to multilingual or English language learners? Off top, they must provide English language learning instruction to help students achieve the same educational goals as all students. Each school district must provide multilingual English language learners with equal access to all school programs and services offered by the school district. And school districts should provide these students with bilingual education. And the law specifically requires charter schools to implement bilingual education, E&L programs, or some other scientifically research-based program approved by the charter's authorizers. You will find that sometimes, unfortunately, charter schools do not offer these programs. Or they offer other programs that aren't actually evidence-based and don't provide much support at all. While charter schools do have flexibility in how they set up their EL programs, the instruction must enable them to develop academically while achieving competence in English. Teachers must have certification to teach bilingual or E&L classes. However, sometimes the teachers don't have that required certification. So this is important. I want folks to really understand that this is an obligation that charter schools do have. It's not just district schools. Language access rights. Parents have the right to get documents translated. That includes report cards, handbooks, IEPs. They have the right to interpretation services at school meetings and IEP meetings. And charter schools do have access to an interpretation service and to the DOE sign language interpretation service. So schools need to provide students with information in a language they can understand. And they must have appropriate and competent individuals to provide translation and interpretation. So they should not be relying on students, siblings, friends, or untrained school staff to translate and interpret for parents. I will note that the DOE is ultimately responsible for translating special education related documents. So that could be IEPs, that could be evaluations. And the DOE is also responsible for having an interpreter at the IEP meeting. We'll get into this a little later, but the DOE is responsible for the special education process for children in charter schools. And we'll get into that a little later. And by a little later, I mean right now. So, true or false? Oh, true or false? Charter schools must provide the services on a student's IEP. So the question is, charter schools must provide the services on a student's IEP. True or false?
I have 4 participants that say true. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 participants that say true.
Okay. Yes, the answer is true. Charter schools are required to provide students with the special education program and services on their IEPs. If the school cannot provide the specific recommended program, they must provide specially designed instruction for the student. And we'll talk a little later about what that actually means. But yes, charter schools are required to provide the services on the student's IEP. They cannot say that that is the role of the DOE. It's not our job. So let's kind of go over the IEP process in charter schools. So it basically follows the same process as students in district schools. Referrals are made directly to the charter school or to the CSE where the charter school is located. Just like district schools, the charter school can make a referral for an evaluation to the CSE. Each charter school is assigned a CSE case manager. Excuse me. When a referral is made, charter schools should provide the DOE with information about the pre-referral intervention services that they provided to the student before the referral. If the student is in grades K through 5 and is being referred due to a possible learning disability, a description of the methodology, interventions, and/or strategies used must be included in the request. In the same way as district schools, pre-referral interventions do not stop the special education evaluation process for students. Because the special education process is basically identical to that in district schools, we won't focus on each step. Instead, in the next few slides, we'll highlight a few key differences and things you'll want to be aware of when working with a student with an IEP in a charter school. Evaluations. The DOE is responsible for conducting evaluations. However, each charter school may conduct their own evaluation, and in fact, a handful do. However, the DOE may assess that outside evaluation and determine whether they need to perform their own evaluation. So the CSE has discretion to allow charter schools to complete their own evaluations. IEPs and charter schools. So the DOE holds the IEP meeting, and it can be at the charter school, it can be at the CSE. The charter school rep must be knowledgeable about the special education resource and programs available at the school. A charter school rep who is aware of these programs and curriculum and able to interpret student progress in school assessments may attend an IEP meeting, but they're not allowed to replace the student's teacher. So sometimes charter networks will have staff that they send to IEP meetings as opposed to the teachers that actually work with the student, and that should not happen. A teacher who is familiar with the student should attend the IEP. This also means that the CSE should not have a special or general education teacher from the CSE simply stand in for the student's teacher during the IEP meeting. We want to make sure that this is clear because this issue does come up. And if an IEP meeting does not have all of the required team members and the parent has not agreed to excuse a particular team member from the meeting, you'll want to discuss with the parent or the educational decision maker about requesting the meeting be rescheduled so all of the appropriate and mandated folks can be at the table. Related service providers can also attend the meetings. Parents can pretty much invite anyone that has knowledge of the student, has knowledge of their academic needs, has knowledge of their academic progress.
So Michael, I have a couple of questions. One is there a difference in referral rates in charters versus district schools? And the other is, if a parent disagrees with the charter's evaluation, can they request a DOE conducted evaluation? So I'll just jump in with the second question. Yes, a parent that disagrees with a charter school's evaluation can absolutely request a DOE conducted evaluation. And even if they disagree with an evaluation that the Department of Education has done, they can also, there's also a process to request an independent evaluation at the DOE's expense. So those are definitely options for parents, and they would follow up with their Committee on Special Education to get those done. In terms of a difference in referral rates to special education in charter schools versus district schools, that's a good question. I'm not sure if we have data on that. What do you think, Michael?
I know I don't have any data on that. But I find that a lot of the parents that I've worked with, the evaluations have been DOE evaluations. Unless they're FBAs, functional behavioral assessments, those type of evaluations where I see charter schools may do more of those, but the evaluations I tend to come across are DOE, evaluations done by the DOE as opposed to the charter school, but I don't have any exact numbers on that.
What about a difference in the rates of referral, charter schools referring students to special education and district schools referring students to special education?
I don't have any data on that.
Yeah, it's a little unclear.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Okay, so IEP development. This is important. Student needs drive recommendations, not the services available at the charter school. The DOE, the charter school, and the parents should be thinking about a combination of appropriate services and supports that the student can receive at the charter school. The CSC should not be recommending services simply because those are the services offered at the charter school. The IEP must be appropriate for the student. It is an individualized program for the student, not an individualized program for the charter school. And we see this a lot where parents are considering moving their child with an IEP to a charter school, and the charter school letting the parent know, oh, by the way, we don't have that program. We don't have that type of classroom. We don't offer those types of services. Let's change the IEP. Or you'll be at an IEP meeting and the CSC may recommend certain services or supports, and the charter school will say, well, we don't actually have that at the school. And then the CSC may say, okay, well, then let's change the IEP to reflect what is available at the school itself. And that is not what should happen. The student's needs is what should be reflected on the IEP, because the IEP follows the student wherever that student goes. The IEP does not follow the charter school. Oops, sorry about that. And this is something that we would like to stress because it is something that we see often. So I'll provide a brief summary of special education in charter schools. So one, the DOE is responsible for evaluating students and holding IEP meetings. Generally, the CFC regional office where the charter school is located is responsible for evaluations and IEPs of students attending the charter school. While the charter school can and should attend the student's IEP meeting and provide information about the student's progress, like teachers' reports, the DOE is responsible for creating and ensuring the accurateness and appropriateness of the IEP. So that also means that, and we've seen this before, charter schools will ask to change their student's IEP without even holding an IEP meeting. They may call up a parent and say, hey, we want to change the student's IEP to say X, Y, and Z. What do you think about that? And that's not how, an IEP meeting needs to happen every time the student's IEP is going to be changed. So that means that all the appropriate vote must be at the meeting. It can't be a phone call. It can't be unclear to the parent that this is an IEP meeting. Can't call you up and say, oh, we have the CSC on the other line. We're just going to make a few changes to your child's IEP. Does that sound good to you? That can't happen. So charter schools, DOE also, they determine eligibility for special education. They revise and amend IEPs, and they declassify students. Charter schools, what are their obligations? They must provide the program and services. There's 3 ways they can implement a student's IEP. There's no hierarchy, so schools don't have to try to provide services to the student directly prior to asking the DOE to provide the service. But there are 3 ways that charter schools can provide the programs and services, and that is either directly, meaning they have it at the school themselves. They can provide the service through a contract agency. So basically, they hire a third party to provide the services, or they can request that the DOE provide the services for the student. But they must implement the IEP. Charter schools can't, they can't say, oh, we don't have this, therefore we can't do it. And that's tough. Send your kid to another school if you want this. That is not how it works. The DOE, yes, the DOE makes sure that the IEP is accurate, but the charter school must implement the IEP as written. And I'll provide a note on providing the program. Many charter schools have ICT classes or integrated co-teaching classes, but not all ICT classes are true ICT classes with 1 special education teacher and 1 general education teacher. Instead, some charters have 2 general education teachers. Now, charter schools do have exceptions from certifications. A certain number of their teachers can be uncertified, but it is important to understand who is teaching the students so you can understand how they're being served and what their needs might be. So it's important to ask the school, is my teacher certified in special education? Are the teachers trained to work with students that have specific needs? Or is it 2 general education teachers that don't have much training in working with students like my child?
Michael, we have another question, which is what if the charter school is recommending a service or program that the charter school does not offer and the parent does not want to change the school? So this may have been partially answered by this second part of the slide, but if the sorry, I was just looking at a note. JC may also be chiming in, but if the charter school doesn't offer the program, the bottom line is that the Department of Education needs to provide an IEP that's appropriate and individual to the student. So if the charter school doesn't offer the program that's recommended, the charter school needs to either create that program or as the options on the screen, or provide services through contracting, with another organization or agency that can provide those services in the school, or ask the DOE to provide those services. So, and the parent has the option to pursue their due process rights and to sue for the proper program for their child to be implemented at the charter school.
Thank
I have,
you. Okay.
I think there might be one other question in the chat. Let me just, that popped up. Let me just find that. Yeah, I have. What's the timeline for a charter school to implement an IEP if they don't have a program or service? So an IEP, when it's created, has an implementation date on it, and the IEP does need to be implemented as soon as possible. There are strict timelines for the dates of from an initial evaluation to the date that the IEP is created. But then once the IEP is created, it should be implemented immediately. If a parent needs to pursue their due process rights through an impartial hearing process, that has its own timeline, and the impartial hearing can take weeks or months to be completed, unfortunately.
Yes, if the implementation date is usually in the top left of the first page of the IEP, and if the charter school says we can't start implementation until a few weeks after that, then that just means that they're in violation of the IEP, and you could seek you could seek some sort of compensatory services for all the time that they haven't been implementing the IEP. So even if they have good intentions, it doesn't mean that they can start the clock on when the IEP is going to be implemented. As we discussed earlier, charter schools can use their own promotion criteria for students with IEPs, and they can request modified promotion criteria on a student's IEP. Parents can also request modified promotion criteria be added to a student's IEP. And if this type of request happens, this charter school should provide the school's promotion policy, propose modifications, and the reasoning for the modified promotion criteria request. So when it comes to promotion, charter schools are given discretion. If you have any questions about the special education process, there's a guide on our website, Guide to Special Education Procedures. And I believe they'll be sending you this PowerPoint, you can click on this actual slide. I believe has a link embedded in the photo. So you can just click on the link and it'll take you there. So Section 504 also applies to parents. So because charters receive federal funding, they must follow Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And that means that they cannot discriminate against students with disabilities, and they must provide reasonable accommodations to students. Students with disabilities under Section 504 are entitled to a FAPE, so a free and appropriate public education, reasonable accommodations and services so that they can participate in and benefit from school programs to the same extent as children without disabilities, and suspension and expulsion protections for behavior relating to a disability covered under Section 504. Charters should inform the parents of the student's right to 504 accommodations, and you can request a 504 plan from the charter school. Parents or any doctors completing the form should specify the types of accommodations the student needs, such as classroom accommodations, breaks, testing accommodations, physical modifications, things like that. And now we'll get into discipline in charter schools. So here's another question, true or false? Charter schools in New York City must follow the DOE's discipline code.
I have 2 votes for no or false. So three false so far.
Any brave souls for true?
And one true.
I keep baiting these folks into giving me the wrong answers. The answer is false. So charter schools aren't required to follow local regulations or discipline policies, including the discipline code. So how are discipline policies different between district schools and charter schools? And you notice I keep saying district schools instead of public schools, because charter schools are public schools. So they're not like a special type of private school. Charter schools are public schools, and district schools are public schools as well. So charter schools create their own discipline policies, but these policies must be consistent with the requirements of due process and federal laws and regulations governing the placement of students with disabilities. So the Charter School Act says that the discipline rules must be consistent with requirements of due process and federal laws and regulations. We'll get into what federal due process means and what it looks like. But the overall gist is charter schools are given broad discretion over their own discipline policies, and DOE's discipline code does not apply.
So Michael, I have another question or comment that I'll just read out. It has to do with the previous topic that we discussed about promotion criteria. So the question is, a charter school gave zeros for 20 assignments that my student made up. He has an IEP, but as it turned out, they did not have additional time on his assignments listed. When I questioned, the school psychologist said that because they are a Regents school and college prep, that they cannot offer that accommodation because that would be altered promotional criteria. I told him that is not true. However, that is the policy of the school. All kids get zeros, and there can be no late work even with a disability. So I'll say that's very unfortunate, and you're correct that is not true. That is not true. Students with IEPs, students with 504 plans have a right to have their accommodations carried out by any school they're in, including a charter school. So that is something that can be followed up with the Committee on Special Education, or if needed through an impartial hearing or due process. There's also another comment. Also, there have been several students in my program who over the years were held back in charter schools, but according to the DOE policy, those students wouldn't have qualified to get held over. One student had 70s and 80s, but the school thought she wasn't ready, and so on. It was very similar for the other 2 kids. In fact, both of those kids had 3s and 4s on state tests, but were held back in their charter school. The parent tried to go to the DOE, and the DOE said that they defer to the charter school. So that's also that's also unfortunate. charter schools do have, in terms of their promotion policy from grade to grade, charter schools do have their own promotion policies. So they do have discretion with that. But that seems kind of like an extreme situation.
Thank you for those questions. So what is a lawful suspension? A lawful suspension is one, it follows the school's discipline policy. So the school can't have a discipline policy and say a student can be suspended for X, Y, and then they suspend the student for Z. If it's not in the discipline policy, it's not a lawful suspension. In-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, and expulsions. What are some examples of illegal removals? So this is when you suspend a student for an undefined period. Undefined period of time could be the school saying, hey, we're suspending a student and we will be in touch with you about when the hearing will be scheduled. Triggered suspension. So these are automatic suspensions that kick a student out if they commit a certain offense without any additional due process protection. So think of it like a 3 strikes rule. Like, you did this, you're suspended, nothing more, there's no discussion about it. Conditional return. So this is a suspension where the school says the student can only return if they do X, Y, and Z before they return. Shortened schedules, where they keep the student out of class or make the student go home earlier. Or double jeopardy. So this is when there was prior discipline, there was a suspension or some sort of consequence. The student cannot then be suspended for that same offense. This can also include mediation. So if you go to mediation and the behavior at issue has been discussed and addressed, the student can't then be suspended later for the same behavior that was discussed and addressed at mediation. There must be some sort of new offense.
So what I sorry to jump in. So we may take a short break. I know we might need to break for pause for the interpreter and just take a short break and come right back. So JC, would you suggest 5 minutes, 10 minutes? 5, perfect. Okay, so we'll come back at 11:26.
Hi, everybody. Yes, thank you so much, Allison. Thank you, Michael. I have been pinch hitting as interpreter for our families here. So thank you, everybody, for your patience. And yes, let's take 5 minutes and come back at 11:26. We'll be right back, everybody. Vamos a regresar de aquí a 5 minutos a las 11:26 minutos. Gracias. All right, well, it's almost 11:26. Ya mero son las 11:26. Before we begin again, however, I wanted to do a quick little survey and see for parents only, please. We just want to make sure we're meeting you at the right time. So let us know when's the best time to meet with you. Queremos hacer una encuesta pequeña para saber a qué hora sea buena para estar reuniendo con ustedes para nuestros seminarios web, cuando sea más conveniente, en las mañanas de 10 a las 12 o en las tardes de 1 hasta las 3 o ya en la noche de 5 a 7. Déjenos saber aquí, por favor. Yeah, we just want to make sure we're meeting you at the best time. Sometimes it's easy when you're working 9 to 5 to meet between 9 to 5, but sometimes life doesn't work that way. So we want to make sure we're meeting with our parents when it's best for them. Thank you. Okay, wow. 2 parents? We'll go with that. All right. Michael, are you good to go?
Yep, I'm good to go.
All right. Vamos a empezar de nuevo. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hold on, let me go ahead and assign myself as interpreter again. Oof.
Hope I haven't lost all the parents except for these two.
I will note we also have another question. There was some follow-up that I'll respond to individually from the last question, but there's a new question. If a parent, let me give JC a moment, actually, I'm sorry. Okay, so if a parent finds out that a charter school is out of compliance, can they request support from P311 and the special education at schools.nyc.gov email address? And the short answer is yes. Parent can contact any of those, and also their charter schools committee on special education to get the students' needs met at the charter school.
Okay. Well, we're in the home stretch now, so bear with me, everybody. Okay.
And we have another question.
All right.
All right. As a follow-up to program recommendation, as I understand your explanation, if a student has a program recommendation of a self-contained class and is accepted to the charter school, and that school only has ICT program, the charter school must create a self-contained class. So the short answer, the simple answer is yes, they have to meet the student's needs according to their IEP. I will say that sort of logistically speaking, it can be challenging for any school that doesn't have a self-contained class in particular to create that, because they need other students that have the same needs to create that class. But if they are not able to, if they don't have the students to create that class, the charter school should either, if they're not able to create it, they should create the specially designed services that the student needs. So that can be, so let me say, the student has the right to what is on their IEP if it's a self-contained class. If that is not something the charter school can meet, the charter school and the Department of Education should offer something that they think can meet those needs. Perhaps it's a paraprofessional on the IEP or an ICT program with providing special education teacher support services or sets, or some other combination of services that would meet the student's needs for something like a self-contained class.
Thank you. So due process. We talked about how charter schools have to follow federal due process rules. So that can come from statutes, legislation, that can also come from cases. So parents have the right to notice of the charges and the basis of the accusation. Notice must be prior to the suspension unless the student is a continuing danger or an ongoing threat of disruption to the academic process. And if immediate removal is allowed, notice must be provided as soon as possible after the suspension begins. Federal due process allows for oral or written notice. However, there is a state commissioner's decision that found that written notice is also required, and that oral notice cannot substitute for written notice. The notice should also be in the parent's native language and be received within 24 hours of the decision to suspend. Oops. Okay. So notice, and now the right to be heard. So students have a right to an explanation of the evidence, what happened, and the ability to tell their side of the story before they are suspended. Unless, like we said earlier, there's some sort of continuing danger to people, property, or the academic process. And students cannot be forced to give a statement against their own interests. So for longer term suspensions, and it's important to read the handbooks because different charter schools define long-term differently. So some charter schools define it as any suspension that's 6 days or more, some it's 11 days or more. Each school has its own definition of longer term suspension. So it's important to also read the handbook that the charter school provides. So for these longer term suspensions, the school must provide the charges at the hearing, The hearing officer must be impartial and base their decision on evidence presented at the hearing. So that means, let's say that the incident involved a teacher. The hearing officer can't be a teacher. Or let's say that there are witnesses. One of the witnesses can't also be the hearing officer. The hearing officer must be someone that's impartial. Now, that said, with charter schools, hearing officers can often be someone affiliated with the school. So they're not fully impartial. It could be someone that works at the school. It could be someone that works on the board of the school. So it may not be a fully impartial hearing officer, but it can be someone that is aware of the incident, someone that has knowledge of it, someone that can testify to it, someone that was involved in the incident. And parents have the right to call witnesses, submit evidence, and be represented by counsel. And hearings must be on the record because you may want to have parent may want to appeal. And in order to have an effective appeal, you want the hearing to be on the record. And this means that the hearing is recorded in a way where the entire thing is captured. Doesn't mean notes, there's not notes taken by a board staff member where word for word recording may not be captured. That's not what it means. It's not someone who takes high level notes. It should be something where the parent has an understanding of everything that happened at the hearing. Oh, oops. The ghost of Zoom. And expulsions, since expulsions are permanent suspensions, we believe that these formal procedures are required for expulsions as well. Parents looking to appeal a charter school suspension or expulsion should follow the grievance procedures. And an individual or a group can file a formal grievance against the charter school when they are alleging that the charter school violated the Charter Schools Act, they violated their own charter, or they violated any provision of the law. And the appeal goes to initially the Board of Trustees. And then from there, the parent can go to the charter school authorizer and then the Board of Regents. There is no timeline for an answer at any level of appeal in the grievance procedure, so that can be a little frustrating. The grievance procedure is also not for just appeals, but any formal grievance that a parent may have against the school, you can go through the grievance process as well. So when a student with a disability is suspended, there are certain things that may need to happen. State and federal special education laws apply to students who attend charter schools, including the laws such as the IDA and 504. And these protections apply to students with IEPs, 504 plans, or students where the school is deemed to know that the student may have a disability. And some of the ways a school is deemed to know that a student may have a disability is because the parent requested evaluations, expressed concern, or there's a long-standing behavioral challenges. So you don't necessarily need an IEP or a 504 plan. As a reminder, suspended students have the right to expedited evaluations if their parent requests an initial evaluation over the course of a suspension, or if the school is deemed to know the student may have a disability. Evaluations have to be completed within 15 days, and the IEP meeting should be held within 5 additional days. The CSC is the one responsible for conducting the expedited evaluations and holding MDR meetings. We will get to what an MDR meeting is in the next slide. And charter schools must hold MDRs for students with 504 plans. So an MDR is short for Manifestation Determination Review. And it is a meeting to determine if the student's behavior was caused by the student's disability or a result of the school's failure to follow the student's IEP or BIP. BIP stands for Behavioral Intervention Plan. And the MDR is required when the student is suspended for 11 or more days in a row, or within 40 school days, or if there's a pattern of behavior. Who attends the MDR? The parent, student if appropriate, an interpreter if needed, anyone with knowledge or expertise about the child. This could be service providers, therapists, agency staff. Anyone can participate by phone. So if someone can't physically be there, you can just have them dial in. And school staff who know the student and can interpret information about their behavior. This could be a school psychologist or a social worker, a para, guidance counselor. And if at the meeting they determine that yes, the student was suspended for reasons related to the disability, then the student should return to school. The CSC should conduct a functional behavioral assessment, and from there create a behavioral intervention plan. If they determine that the suspension was not related to the disability, then the student can remain suspended, and the CSC should consider doing an FBA and a BIP and determine placement in services during the suspension. If during the MDR, the CSC finds deficiencies in the student's IEP, student's placement, or the implementation of the IEP, even if they do not find that the conduct is a manifestation, they must take immediate steps to remedy these deficiencies. Students in charter schools whose suspensions are upheld at the MDR do not get suspension plans like students in district schools. Under the applicable law, they are entitled to services, so they may continue to participate in the general education curriculum, although in another setting, and make progress toward meeting their IEP goals. If you disagree with the MDR decision, you can file an impartial hearing to appeal the decision, and the hearing must be done on an expedited basis and scheduled within 15 days. If you are considering requesting a hearing, let AFC know. I don't know what the fall is going to look like, but we'll touch briefly on remote learning in charter schools. So general charter school obligations. Charter schools must implement placement and the special education services. So this includes classroom, related services, paraprofessional. The pandemic, remote learning has not given a waiver to charter schools to not provide what is on the student's IEP. We understand that it is a little different to provide some of these services remotely, but that doesn't mean that the charter school no longer has that obligation during remote learning. A charter school student is eligible for a DOE iPad if the student has an IEP, lives in shelter, foster care, or is doubled up. Parent can request a device at the link in the PowerPoint, and the same discipline rules apply while remote. So students should not be put in separate rooms. Students should not be suspended or left out of classrooms for disciplinary reasons, especially if the behavior that is at issue is somehow related to the student's disability. And schools should not be using remote learning as a punishment. So let's say that you're in person and there's some sort of behavioral issue. The school, if this is something that you've seen, you should contact us, where the school then places the student in remote learning for a disciplinary reason. That is something that, if that is something you're seeing, please let us know. So here are some takeaways. Charter schools cannot refuse to educate multilingual learners or L students or students with disabilities. They should offer specially designed instruction to students with IEPs who need unique supports and services. They have to implement what is on the student's IEP. Students suspended from charter schools get due process and alternative instruction. Students with IEPs or 504 plans, or who parents believe have some sort of disability, they get MDRs when they're suspended, and IEP services remain during remote learning. If you have any questions, this is, you can contact us at this link right here, this email. We also have a number that you can find on the website for our helpline. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you all.
We also have an evaluation link that would be, I think this one is active, that we would appreciate any feedback.
Thank you so much, Michael and Allison, for that thorough presentation. If there are any questions, please, now is the time. We have a few more minutes, and if not, we can give you back a few minutes, which is always nice. So please let us know. We'll be sure to share the presentations and the links to the evaluation form, and also the contact information so you can get in touch with AFC in these cases. But yes, and if not, then I will go ahead and activate our survey. And before I let you guys go, just wanted to let you know that tomorrow we will have a presentation over early childhood, or excuse me, early intervention by our colleagues at the New York Center for Infants and Toddlers. And they'll be going over the entire process for that. That's primarily focuses on students between the ages of 0 to 3 that you might suspect have a disability. So we will be covering that tomorrow. But if not, I will let everybody go. And thank you so much, Michael and Allison, for joining us today. It's always a pleasure. And yes.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions.